All right. I think it's being recorded here. So I have with me Lyndon, and you're going to share your healing story, healing with medical meme information, and I'm excited to hear about your journey. So, do you want to just tell me a little bit about, um, you know, where it began, some of the things you went through, what led you to the medical meme information?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for having me on. By the way, Josh, I really appreciate your time. And I just, after looking back at my whole life, I'm just realizing how important it is to share our healing successes in this life whenever we accomplish and make a great stride with improvement in our health. It's really important to let other people know what that is, what it looks like. And so thank you. Yeah, it's really an honor to be
Definitely.
here. Yeah, I'd say it started, it started when I was young. I had life-threatening asthma. I was gasping for air all the time. Uh, you know, had to be resuscitated a number of times, stopped breathing, you know. So it was really bad. And so I sort of grew up going to all these different doctors and specialists look for help with my asthma. And there was just nothing, like no improvement hardly over the years. But they can save your life. They can save. I realize that they have that, they have these life-saving inhalers, but all these other medications they gave me, like not one of them had a noticeable impact on my asthma over the years. And so by the time I was an adult, I kind of like lost faith in that.
Yeah.
Not really consciously, but more subconsciously. I just kind of, I was responsible for setting my own doctor's appointments all of a sudden when I was 18 and stuff like that. And so it wasn't that I wouldn't go to the doctor, but it was just that, I stopped going to them for the most part, like, looking for more medications or more trying the same nonsense that had been, you know, happening my whole life. So
Yeah. I understand that.
yeah.
Kind of
So
losing faith in the medical industry a little bit.
exactly. Yeah. So yeah, and when by the time I was about 23 years old, that was back in 2008, I had this crazy schizophrenic episode, just completely lost touch with reality. Um, I thought that I could like read people's minds, and I thought that the water had turned to blood, and like,
Hmm.
I was, uh, you know, I thought that just I was on some. I thought I was like a savior or something. I was on this wild spiritual journey, and yeah, I did just it was wild. And at some
Yeah.
point during that, and this is really I think important, is that somebody had told me, hey, maybe you'd been drugged or poisoned.
Hmm.
And I was starting to realize, like, wow, I have no idea what's real.
Hmm.
So I started trying to figure out, like, writing things down, like, what the heck is going on with me? Like, what is reality? What can I be sure
Yeah.
of? I didn't know what I could be sure of. I thought maybe I had died, or something something had happened in the world. Like, I thought maybe like the apocalypse had started or something. And like
Yeah.
I was like, something's way off here. I don't know what's going on. But
Yeah.
um
I
yeah,
could
so
totally relate to that. I had some similar experiences, so that doesn't
really,
sound funny. Yeah, funny to me at all. Yeah.
wow.
So my I don't know if you know, but my diagnosis was schizoaffective, so that's what I struggled with years ago. I was first hospitalized like 20 years ago. So, but were there like some triggers leading up to that, or things
Oh
that?
yeah. Yeah, looking back, it had to be kind of like a perfect storm kind of a situation. I think looking back, like I was kind of being set up. Now, I didn't have any of like the, I didn't have any sort of emotional instability or previous mental health challenges or anything that would lead you to think that this would happen to me. Like, there was no reason. I was enjoying my life. I was doing really well in college. I was working two jobs part time. I was having a blast. I was being like a social butterfly for the first time in my life. But what was setting me up for all that was I was drinking. I was drinking a fair amount. I was pounding the caffeine like you wouldn't believe. pounding the caffeine
Mm-hmm.
because I worked at a popular coffee chain that we're all familiar with, and you
Mm-hmm.
get free junk all day long there. Or at least I got
Mm-hmm.
free junk there all day long. You know, free caffeine, and not just caffeine, but all the worst junk food that goes along with
Mm-hmm.
it. You know, GMOs and all kinds of nasty stuff. So I was just
Yeah.
getting it free all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and I was also eating pretty poorly because I wasn't feeding myself much. I was eating out a lot. Yeah, it was kind of like that was starting to set me up, I think, for this disaster.
Yeah.
And putting out a lot of adrenaline with all that activity. All the two jobs and school full time and partying in between.
Yeah. Yeah.
Clearly, I
Definitely.
was under a lot of physiological load.
Yeah. And the adrenaline helps heat up the metals in the brain as well. So
Yeah,
we know.
corrodes
We
them
know.
and moves them
Yeah.
around. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So.
So I figure, looking back, I want to say if it was something physical, and some people think that maybe this was also like a spiritual event in my life, like there's definitely all these religious contexts or connotations, things that were of a spiritual nature going on. Like, I thought I could detect some sort of entities or demons or something.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of felt like they were demons, but I wasn't sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was the craziest thing. I wasn't visually hallucinating, right? But I was listening to these songs that I had heard all through the years growing up, very familiar songs, classics that my dad had playing on the radio station. And the radio station was like 99.9, and that freaked me out. Just because
Mm-hmm.
I was like, flipping the number. And
Yeah.
and then the songs were not singing the normal lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, and it was crystal clear. This is the weirdest thing I'd ever experienced, probably, or one of the weirdest things. But the words in perfect time were singing about me and taunting me
Mm-hmm.
about my
Yeah.
situation I was experiencing in that moment with
Yeah.
schizophrenia. And they were so perfectly adapted, so natural sounding, and yet it was the original music, the original instruments and everything, but just the words were completely different. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, okay, I know there's something that's not like normal. Like there's
Yeah.
something in
Yeah.
there. There's something coming from that radio that's not. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
tuned into a different kind of radio here. I don't know what this is, but
I I understand that. It's very difficult when your understanding of the world kind of breaks down and you don't really understand how to function, on a day-to-day basis. How long? Because episodes are cyclical. So was it just that one time? How long did that last? Um,
yeah. So basically, after a couple weeks, I sort of like tried to figure out what reality was, and what I written down was like basically a few family members that I was like,
mhm,
okay, these people love me, and this is what I can be sure about. This is my dad, he loves me. This is my mom, she loves me. This is my brother, etc. And then
mhm,
from there, I kind of like just started to try to get back into normal life. Luckily, nobody institutionalized me because most of this was just happening here, and I wasn't telling people what I was experiencing.
mhm,
So they just knew that there was something wrong, really wrong with me because I was acting really weird, but they didn't. I knew that what I was experiencing in here was too weird to tell them somehow. So I was
mhm,
like not sounding completely crazy.
mhm,
I was just acting crazy. So they're just
mhm,
confused. And so nobody put me in a hospital, thankfully, but it kind of started just tapering down. And this is why I think that there was probably like a viral infection involved.
mhm,
So there was probably an immune event. And then as my immune system started to get control, so this is a theory, obviously, but it works with, you know, medical mediums information. So
mhm.
um, as far as I can understand, but the caffeine also being a major trigger, and the probably the heavy metals that are in all the coffee.
Mhm. So was this during college or after college?
This was right in the middle of college.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it just kind of like slowly faded, and then I just ended up having like this anxiety, this background sort of social anxiety, and
Hmm.
um, I was not the same person. I was like damaged. I was like,
Hmm.
I cut off all my friends, basically lost a lot of friends, and there was part of me that I had lost, and then my hair started falling out all over my body.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
and
That's serious trauma. Like I don't think most people realize like that's a serious trauma to the mind and body. That type of experience.
yeah, going through a
So
complete loss of reality. That's
yeah,
why.
yeah, it's very very difficult. So
Yeah.
um, okay,
Oh,
so
and I was also, I remember before that, like for months before that, I was also working graveyard shift, like in the middle of the night
hmm
for like months, and I was trying to get off of that, and it was really messing with me. I
hmm
felt like I was like it was doing. I could tell like it was really
yeah,
messing with me. I
yeah,
wasn't losing reality yet, but I was just really feeling terrible with
yeah,
that schedule. So I feel like that was really hard on my adrenals too. But
yeah, yeah,
um,
definitely.
yeah, I think that was part of leading up to it. Now that I think about it,
Okay,
but yeah.
okay,
Anyway, and then I was still going to college, but I transferred to a university, and then a couple of years later, had another kind of like situation where my skin was kind of starting to get worse at this point. Like my skin conditions, I had very minor skin conditions leading up to this point, but then the hair, and then I had a surgery, crashed my car, lost my girlfriend,
wow,
different, all this stuff. Then I was on antibiotics after the surgery. And I think the combination of these things, oh, I poisoned myself with pesticides. Um, and the
like using
combination of all these
pesticides,
things. Yeah, I was using pesticides back then
like in your yard or
in my house,
in your
like
house.
in my room, all over my room, in
Yeah,
my living room.
yeah, like
And yeah,
ant spray and that kind of stuff.
it was flea spray. It was like pet
Okay,
spray. It was
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I thought that there was a flea infestation or something like that. And
Okay,
I was neurotic, like about
yeah, yeah,
insects and bugs. So,
okay,
um,
yeah. I get it. It's not.
now I
It's
look back and
people.
I'm like, that was insane.
Yeah, I've been in situations like that. People can't understand what that's like when reality breaks down like that, and um, like our mind is trying to process and understand what we're experiencing, but it's not like lining up, and it's not like in a functional way. So I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And then so that was really the thing that it really turned me into realizing like, okay, I'm desperately looking for health information here. Like I'm just putting all my time into health, looking for supplements and herbs, and going to health events, health conferences, and studying online, researching molecules and compounds
Yeah.
and everything that I could find.
Hmm.
Because when your skin goes haywire, it's like it's terrible.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, and it ended up for me like psoriasis, and then like eczema and shingles all hit me over the course of several years, and it was just getting worse and worse. And I got on this terrible diet. It was like clean paleo, high protein, high fat kind of thing. And got a little bit of improvement, got my hair back, but then my skin was awful, had more symptoms coming up. It was a awful, awful time in my life. And then
Yeah.
I was struggling so hard to just with my health, started getting fatigue and insomnia and back pain. And so like I was struggling just to even be able to work enough. Couldn't really keep up with everything going on with me. Um,
Yeah.
and I ended up, getting kicked out of my place and started living in my car. And Yeah, so I was in my car on and off for about 3 years,
Yeah.
still looking for information, looking for answers, and basically on my hands and knees to God at this point, like,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't have much of a spiritual direction. I was, kind of vaguely spiritual and searching, seeking, and now I was, you know, just coming to this idea that, man, I know that I was not made to suffer, you know,
Hmm.
and so I said, okay, if I have to suffer this, if I have to keep going on this life, because I did not want to be on this planet at this point.
Hmm.
But if I'm going to do this, like, it has to have meaning, it has to have purpose. If I'm going to suffer through this, like, I'm taken from the lesson of Jesus, like,
Hmm.
I don't know if I believed in Jesus, but I thought, okay, well, I could still learn something from this because, like, he sacrificed himself for the benefit of others.
Hmm.
So I thought, if I have to go through this, I'm going to go through this so that I make sure that nobody else has to go through this. I'm going to make sure that other people get the help that they need by finding
Hmm.
my way through this. And that's the only way I would be able to justify living like this, because it was so devastating for me.
Yeah.
Uh, so
I had the same. The only way to understand it is through the cross. It's the only way to like deal with that level of hardship and injustice. Did you have like relationship challenges leading up to that? Um, did you have like the loss that people go through with chronic illness? Did you did you find some of those losses difficult to process? Did you have any um, like the injustice of it, or was it just like I don't know why this is happening, but I'm going to find out. Like, you know what I mean? Was it emotionally difficult to process some of that stuff?
um, kind of, I mean, I was just struggling to really just connect with people in general. Like, I was just felt really alone. And yeah, like, had a lot of trouble making friends, because I transferred into a college, and I kind of had no like social stability growing up as it was. So I kind of always had this sort of difficulty connecting because I'd always moved around. And so when I got that schizophrenic episode, it was just like, okay, now I'm really broken, and I'm like struggling to just getting anything meaningful as far as relationships go. And then
Yeah.
I was feeling, it was like a feeling of just like not being worthwhile, knowing like, okay, I'm in this broken situation. I'm as sick as can be. Like, who in the heck would want to deal with this mess? So I just kind of like came to accept that I just need to be alone, or I'm supposed to be alone, or something like that right now. And
Yeah.
that was where I
It's
was
so
at.
difficult.
Yeah.
It's so difficult, like feeling like worthless. I understand that sometimes too. Yeah. It's like for me, I guess you sound like you handled it a lot better than I did. Like I was angry and like felt it was such an injustice and stuff. So sounds like you handled it pretty well. Um, yeah.
Well, I think that I was learning a lot of like valuable life lessons through it because of that solitude that I had in my life. I had a lot of deep thought and a lot of inner work, sort of. I had connection to nature, and these, like, that's immense. Like, if I have to say one thing about mental health,
Hmm.
connection to nature is like one of the biggest things, because when it comes to mental health, we can't all eat a perfect diet often, because it's the
Hmm.
nature of mental health that prevents us from doing so. Whether it be
Yeah.
sticking with it or being able to understand it or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
so that's when nature is really important. And if nature was there kind
Yeah.
of throughout my life from, about 12 years on, I was really developing this deep connection with nature that was helping me in a way that, yeah, probably would have been like super sus. I probably wouldn't have made it through without that.
Wow.
I did feel anger. I did feel that, you know, uh, yeah, I felt the desperation. I felt a lot of that. But
Yeah.
mostly I
Was
think it was just sadness and depression and anxiety.
yeah. Was it scary for you? Because I've come close a couple times. Like after one of my hospitalizations, my family didn't want me to live with them, and I had to choose between a homeless shelter and a group home. So I ended up living in a group home. But was it like scary for you, that period where you were living in your car when you weren't able to work or whatever because of your health, or whatever landed you in that situation, the challenges you were facing? Was it like scary or?
Yeah, I mean, it was scary, and it was scary, but it was also like liberating because I was in such a condition where I'm like I didn't want anybody to see me. So it was like
Mhm.
it was just helpful for me to kind of like retreat and hide away from the world and like take my problems away from everybody because I didn't know how to reach out or engage with
Yeah.
people that anyway.
Okay.
So it also felt, I think, liberating to that in that way because I didn't have to be seen, and
Okay.
I didn't have to deal with the shame and all the, you know, that stuff that I was
Yeah.
experiencing.
Yeah. Okay. So after that period,
Did I lose you, Joshua? Give you one moment here. Did we lose connection?
hello?
Okay, we're back.
Yeah, I don't know, froze there for a second.
Okay.
All right.
So the question I didn't hear, if you want to tell me
Yeah.
that question.
So I was just wondering, what did something change during that period where you were living in your car and on your search for healing? What was the next step?
Yeah, yeah, it was about 2016, and I was uh, I I just decided to have my brother baptize me in a stream.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was an ice cold stream,
Wow.
and for some reason, yeah. So I just decided like, hey, maybe this is the healing I need or whatever, and yeah. But it was about a year after that baptism, 2017, that I found Anthony Williams' books.
Wow.
And actually, it was first the podcast. It was on SoundCloud, and thank God I'm a musician, I guess, because if I wasn't a musician, then I wouldn't have known of SoundCloud. But it was an offbeat platform. Not a lot of people paid attention to it after a while, but yeah. So I was on SoundCloud and I found the truth behind eczema and psoriasis, and I listened to that
Wow.
podcast, and that blew my mind because nobody had spoken with the confidence and the clarity and the level of detail and the and offered as much uh help in that one little one little podcast. And I was just immediately, I was like, this is different. Like, I don't know, I was just ready because I'd been on the same crappy diet for like 3+ years, and getting my protein
Yeah.
and eating real clean and everything. And I was so disciplined, by the way. Like, I had a healthy lifestyle. I lived as well as I could with that information that I had. And I didn't eat any fast food. I didn't eat any packaged food or processed food. It was like I cooked everything at home. I was super disciplined by this point because I was really ready for my skin to get better. But I
Yeah.
found that podcast, and the next day I bought everything differently. Every ounce of food that I ate was now for my skin.
Mm-hmm.
And I started noticing within a couple weeks, I was feeling different. I was feeling better. I was having this new energy come into my body, like the anxiety and the depression were starting to kind of fade right away. And I was like, okay, my skin's not better, but I can feel like more hydrated in my skin. Like I was drinking a gallon of water before that, a gallon of spring water every day, and I was not ever hydrated. But now I was getting almost all raw food. And then I had like a little bit of cooked food and a little bit of fat at the end of the day. And that's where I started out, because it was just book one back then, 2017, and it was just the podcast. So I was listening to the podcasts and trying to find out every ounce of information about every chronic disease, because I was interested not just in healing my own disease, but I was like, okay, this guy's got information on everything. He's got information on autoimmune illness, on cancer, on all these different things. So I was just like going through it and tried to understand it as much as I could, and just completely blown away by the information. But yeah, and I was just I noticed that something was happening in my body. Things were changing. The fatigue, the insomnia, things were getting better. I was getting more energy in my body and I could feel it. But it was still a lot of battles. It was still a lot of ups and downs from that point. But I just kept learning and getting into the information, buying every book when it came out, and then used the information at Life-Changing Foods, especially used that information to get myself out of living in my car, getting into better and better positions in my life. And eventually I had healed over 50 symptoms, and ended up where I am today.
You said Life-Changing Foods book?
Yeah, the Life-Changing Foods. I use that, like that information was so critical, I think, for helping me out of that terrible situation where I just had no friends, and I was living in my car, and there's just so many things about their spiritual lessons to the food and the emotional support and all that, and I was using all of it.
So how did you rehabilitate, in addition to the food, which is critical, right? We need to know what's causing the symptoms and what heals the symptoms. But how did you rehabilitate your life in terms of working, relationships, finances, like all the other aspects of life that people have to manage?
Yeah, there was a lot to it. Honestly, going fully into the information, like learning everything. I had the faith, I had the faith. The faith was at the heart of it, because it took me a while to really resolve, to get to the point where I was like, okay, this is definitely working for my skin. This is definitely helping out with my insomnia. This is definitely helping out with the fatigue. Because those things took years, and there was ups and downs, took me close to 5 years of fully committed not just fully committed practice, but fully committed practice and study and refining to get out of that. I mean, it was step by step. It was like for instance, I'll give you for instance, in Life-Changing Foods, there's this spiritual lesson about the grapes, right? So when you pick and you eat grapes, when you select them, you just focus on that intention of finding your true home, because the grapes kind of represent this metaphysical and physical connection between the ones that are growing next to each other. So they sort of grow just the right size so that they're not crowding each other, and they fit in together. So it's like this metaphor for finding your home, and that was like one tool, right? Like I would start eating grapes whenever I could, and I was like focused on finding my home, because I knew my home wasn't in my car.
Yeah.
And over the years, my idea of home has changed, because I moved several times. The first thing I did was I moved to a job where I could get housing as part of the job. So it was still hell. But I was working in a kitchen at first, and they provided me a place it was a canvas tent in the forest, in the beautiful redwood forest of Northern California, so right by the ocean. So they let me stay in a tent. I was working in the kitchen. I was still miserably, fatigued and insomnia and all kinds of stuff, but But it was one step up, you know, and then the next step from there was moving to help my mom. And then I helped her out with the same information for over a year and helped her deal with, you know, weight loss and respiratory issue infections. And that was right about 2020, 2019, actually, by the way. And so yeah, and then I moved again and again, and I kept looking for better jobs. So it was just a whole process. And as I was focusing on those grapes and those cranberries and the spiritual lessons there, those were pivotal, as well as the discovering the angels, of course. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
yeah, that I was praying the whole way through. Let me tell you, like from day one, as soon as I learned about those angels, I was constantly talking to them every single chance I could get, because it was only faith that was going to get me through and get me
Right.
out of that situation.
Yeah. That's incredible. That's very inspiring. Just having faced some of that similar stuff myself, sounds like you handled it with a lot of humility and grace. You know, I basically threw tantrums the whole way through. I feel like I've been kicking and screaming the whole way through the learning process. But that's very inspiring. Like those are very difficult challenges to face, and like to rehabilitate yourself at each stage, at each level of healing. Um, that's a lot. So yeah. Um, I don't think most people can really understand how difficult that is. So it's very inspiring that you've been doing this work. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's also been, you know, focusing on how I could use it to help others along the
Yeah,
way that gave me that courage to keep, you know, moving through it, and
yeah,
um staying with the faith, you know. The faith
yep,
faith has held me together through all of it, you know.
yeah, definitely.
Extreme faith.
Yeah,
It's not a mustard seed, you know, that got me through that.
yeah, well,
So, or maybe it was, and maybe that's all that's needed. But
yeah,
there's a lot of faith behind it. And um, you know, I also had this, you know, I was studying the success mindset stuff, you know, the success psychology of Tony Robbins and Napoleon Hill and Bob Proctor, different guys like that over the years. And that was really helpful for me too, to kind of like keep my mind focused on the goal, on the dream of staying positive. And you know, that positive psychology only takes us so far in actual healing physical things, but it
yeah,
can really help us to kind of stick to it and really, you know, keep faithful, I guess.
yeah.
Um and
So you said you were baptized in 2016. So
yeah.
is that part of your faith? Like, do you read the Bible? Do you study the teachings of Jesus and those types of things as well, or has that been part of your journey?
Yeah, it has been. And yeah, I'm also sort of like a little bit more open spiritually in general as well. I'm not just like exclusively um following the Bible as the only source of knowledge and truth, but I do read it. Tend to study it with other people, especially. But um,
Hmm.
you know, I go to church, and uh, but I like learning from like Buddhism, and I think there's other valuable lessons in spirituality as well that may not
Hmm.
be in the Bible necessarily. Um, but yeah, I mean, I was raised Christian, and I guess it's also like maybe a cultural thing for me as well. So
Okay.
um, yeah,
A cultural thing in the sense that that's what you participate in, or a cultural thing in that that's what other people's beliefs around it are. You know what I mean? Like when you say
um,
cultural thing, do you mean that you participate in the cultural aspect of it, or what other
Yeah,
people.
yeah, like it makes sense. It makes sense for me to participate in it on a cultural level.
Okay.
Ultimately, I mean, I think that there's so much value in it, and I just have I hesitate. What I hesitate to do is say like that I know the exact way and that everybody needs to do the thing that I'm doing, you know, I
Hmm.
guess. But
I'm just asking on your journey if that's been part of helpful for you on your journey. That's all. I'm
yeah,
not trying to push. I'm not trying to push Christianity on the listeners at all. So
for sure. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
no. That's exactly what I'm trying to avoid doing, but I'm saying it
yeah,
has. Yeah, that's been like as far as like you know, following the teachings of what it is, you know, it's about healing people. You know, if you're going to follow Jesus, you're going to heal people and you're going to teach people and you're going to help conquer suffering, and that's kind of that makes a lot of sense to me, you know. You
yeah,
just you just live here, you try to be, yeah, you know, you embrace brotherhood and you look out for your neighbors and your family and your loved ones. I mean, there's the essence and the principles are so important there, and that yeah, that's been it's been huge for me for sure.
okay, okay,
So yeah, yeah, and again, yeah, I don't approach it with such a too. I try not to be dogmatic about it. You know,
of
I'm
course,
open to learning from other people and saying, you know, hey, what do you think too? You know, what are you learning that might be different or
of
um,
course,
you know,
and that's how Anthony approaches it as well. So yeah, of course,
yeah.
understand.
But I mean, this book has been around for 2,000 years, so I'm not just going to ignore it.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
of course. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Like I could say personally, on my journey, like my faith in Jesus has been critical. Like I couldn't have made it without that. Like I said earlier, like the cross, like I understood what I went through the context of the cross, and that for me that was critical. But I'm not. That's just sharing my testimony, just like like we're all doing. We're sharing our testimony of healing, the lessons we learned along the way. Yeah, so totally not trying to pressure anyone into anything. So yeah. All right. So how are things now? Like you said, there were different. You got that job in the kitchen, living in a tent, and then you were helping out your mom, and then so have you? And there are ups and downs in the process, the healing journey. How's it been the last couple of years?
Yeah. So the last couple of years have just been incredible. Like the last couple of years, getting the best energy of my life, like better energy than before I was actually chronically ill. When I just thought I had like normal energy, getting out of bed, stumbling and like kind of a little groggy. Like I thought that was normal, but now even if I don't get enough sleep, I'll wake up and I'm fully on, fully
Yeah,
present, and that's different for me. Um,
yeah,
and so yeah, and then so my my most of my symptoms are gone. Over 50 symptoms. I have got a big list. I wrote them all down and I started putting check marks by them. And my skin still kind of goes a little bit up and down, but it's still better than it has been over those 7 years. Kind of it just goes up and it goes down, but it gets better each time. It gets better. It gets more better each time.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
So to
great.
speak. So yeah. So it's it's never going to end in a way. Like you can always get better. You're never going to be perfect, but my health is just so much better than it's ever been, I think. And so it's a great blessing. And
Yeah,
my relationships are really a huge thing, is that, in all this resetting of my life, I've, I found myself in a place where I've been able to get community, like really wonderful community and friends, like good friendships, people that love me, people that care for me, people that I care about, and it's been really beautiful. The last couple of years has really been seeing that fruit that
yeah,
come to fruition a lot, and
yeah.
yeah,
I think that's really important because in the early part of during my illness has lasted a long time, since 2003, but I isolated. I felt a lot of injustice with people, and I blamed some of the people in my life for the difficult things I was going through, and I withdrew. And and I've been doing the healing foods for, I don't know, like 9.5 years at this point, the medical medium
Wow.
foods, and information. And I think, Anthony's mentioned over the years, like there's a little bit in the healing path about support, and he's mentioned a little bit about relationships and whatnot. But I think that is a critical piece of healing, um, is how we're spiritually and emotionally understanding like the human relationships in our life. And that's something that took me a long time to learn, and I'm starting to realize the significance of that. So that's wonderful that you're finding that community. And um, that's like the grapes, like, we're all part of this network of human relationships, and that's very important. And I think it is difficult to find just regular chronic illness as well, because people don't understand it. It puts a lot of strain on relationships. So yeah, that's great.
It does. Yeah, I've literally lost people that fell out of my life. Probably what it seemed to me is just because I was, too far down for them. They couldn't really
Yeah,
sit by and watch what was going on for me. And I don't judge them for that, but I recognize
yeah,
that as basically because I was ill and I was poor
yeah,
and I was a drag, you know.
yeah.
So
That's terrible. I mean,
it's terrible. Like really
yeah,
like the world needs compassion, more greater compassion than that. But I
yeah,
understand that some people are just trying to have compassion for themselves because they're probably, you know, they got their own stuff to deal with,
yeah, yep,
Yeah. And, you know, um, yeah, I love that you said that support is the more that the more that you think about it, like that support is so crucial. Like getting to a place, it's like support isn't just like this thing where like you get a practitioner, which isn't a super important piece, of course, for so many people, but like it's not like you just get this practitioner and like, oh, I have support now. I mean, that might be enough for some people, but like, it's a process of getting an environment of people around you that can show you compassion, show you love, show you patience, show you the space and everything that you need to live a good life that facilitates healing like at a deeper level. And
yeah.
that's this kind of support that I'm really finding now. And
That's
the kind of
wonderful.
support that I want to help other people, I want to help bring other people to as well is like this is a deep support that you want to look for, not just you know, you don't need just one friend that can hear you every now and then, you know.
Yeah,
You need a whole community.
yeah. So in finding that support, um, like, did you have an experience of feeling more loved or less worthless, or like, was that healing for you in itself, just finding those relationships? Or
Absolutely. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
I have to say, that's been one of the most difficult parts of my journey since the very beginning. So, um, yeah, who knows? Maybe Anthony will touch on that in the spiritual book when it comes out. We'll see.
As far as getting back into like community and support and friends and
Yeah,
family.
yeah,
Yeah.
more about relationships. Um, you know, people not really understanding. I found it very difficult that people didn't understand what I was going through. So um,
Yeah.
you seem like you handled it a lot better than I did, I have to say. So kudos to you. I mean, it takes a lot of courage, and I don't even know what to go through that kind of stuff, but you seem like you handled it pretty well. So that's very inspiring.
Thanks. Thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, yeah. It's I think it's more just by force, like a
like
momentum in my life,
necessity.
Yeah.
By what?
Yeah,
Just like
like just the way I was raised and I grew up like I was homeschooled. I was a shy kid. I didn't have any friends growing up a lot, so I was just used to being independent and
Okay.
kind of shielded from the world in a lot of ways. And so by the time I got to, high school was the first time I was in public school. Um, it like there was a process of finding myself for all of high school, of course, and then by the time I got to college, I was like, I realized I am a social creature, but that was taken away from me after like the schizophrenic episode too. So I had like this brief time of like discovering myself socially, and then bam, it was all gone again. I was like, now I couldn't really build relationships. So for me, it was always kind of like this distance between me and the rest of the world. And I think that's kind of what's really kept me closer to the spiritual support and the nature, and that was it was kind of like by force. It's like you have to find some kind of connection in your life, whether it be human beings or animals or plants. Like we all find the connections that sustain us, more or less.
Yeah.
And I think it's just like the nature of my life has forced me into to those more stable forms of support that
Yeah.
guided me along.
That's great. Well, I'm so inspired, I have to say, and I can feel for some of the things you went through. I'm not really putting them into words. I don't think they can be put into words, but I can definitely feel for some of the things you went through, and I'm just so happy you're doing well, and you're healing with the medical medium information, and it's so inspiring. So, um, you know, thank you for fighting for it. Like Anthony says, he had to fight for the gift to get us all this information. When we all have to fight for it when we go through chronic illness, so that we could share our testimony for others and try to help others. So, thank you. It's a very powerful testimony.
Hey, my pleasure, Joshua. And you're such a light to the world yourself, just helping bring out the information that you feel like is going to help and heal people, and being the person that you are. And I think that's really, really incredibly valuable, really special, really wonderful.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
So, all right. Well, I appreciate you sharing your story here, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to find it helpful. So, thank you very much, Lyndon.
my pleasure, Josh.